Hello, dear friends. Today we continue our acquaintance with the surprisingly candid and detailed memoirs of a Wehrmacht general. Don't forget to rate the video, and let's get started. September 29th, 1941. Meanwhile, frosts began at night. Even during the day, it rarely felt warmer than 4 to 5 degrees. The perpetually gray sky hangs over the earth, and a cold wind blows across the fields. Weather experts say that this will continue until the end of October. Then it will rain until mid-November, and then the rivers will freeze and melt at the end of April. What a lovely prospect. You at home cannot even imagine what it is like to live day and night in an open field, as the infantrymen do. And they are still wearing their summer uniforms instead of their winter gear. The drivers have already put on their sheepskin coats. They are very strangely cut, tight-fitting to the waist, and below that there is a bell-shaped part with folds. All the sheepskin is on the outside. All the women have covered their heads with thick shawls and look as if they have toothache. They wrap flannel or felt around their calves and wear bast shoes on their feet. They look a bit like Eskimos. All this is called Great Russia. This is where we are. Before us are endless forests. They say that wolves are like domestic animals here. Rumor has it that someone has already been bitten by a rabid wolf. This is quite possible here, as it is not only lice and bed bugs that bite. No one even talks about them anymore. We have never seen villages more miserable than these. They are squat and scattered across the valleys. All the houses are made of thick timber, even inside. You feel like a hunter in the Wild West. The stove and the place for cooking are one and the same thing, with a large hole in the center where wood is burned. There is no coal, so they heat with wood. The stove is so big that it almost cuts the room in half. Since it stands against the long wall, it divides the room into 2 small chambers. In them are wooden bunks where people sleep. Another place to sleep is above the stove, at a height of about 1.5 meters. It seems to be an honorable place to sleep. I think that when the 30-degree frost hits, we will climb up there. There is one problem with the field mail. They say that 70 train cars were found in Warsaw, filled to the brim with letters that no one can sort because there are not enough workers. The deeper we go into Russia, the bigger this problem becomes. September 29th. Letter to my wife. We are on the eve of a decisive battle in Russia. We can be sure that we will once again achieve great success. It is not yet clear whether it will reach the scale of what happened near Kiev. Nevertheless, the further development of the overall situation in the East depends on our immediate achievements. They say that the situation in Kiev is not very favorable, as the Russians left behind and hid a huge amount of mines and explosives before retreating, which are now blowing up. The conduct of hostilities that we are witnessing has nothing to do with a war fought within the bounds of decency. October 1st, 1941. In his excellent order, the Führer emphasizes the importance of this decisive battle. We will soon find out whether our plan is up to the task. We believe that it is too small and will not result in the desired encirclement of enemy troops. It will be very bad if a significant part of the Russians manage to escape. Then they will have enough resources to rebuild their army over the winter. God forbid that the Russians should escape. But tonight, our front is remarkably quiet. October 8th. I am back in the school classroom, writing while sitting on a school bench. Outside, the first snow is falling. The cold autumn wind is blowing leaves off the trees around the ruined church opposite. Around it are the broken gravestones of the family that once patronized the local village. They were probably broken 23 years ago during the Revolution, and no one ever bothered to clear away the debris. The estate, which once belonged to this wealthy family of glass factory owners, was turned into a district party committee. Only the chimneys remain. Opposite, the ruins of the factory, which was set on fire by partisans when the Germans approached, are still smoldering. In a barn filled to the ceiling with firewood lie the remains of a chopped-up iconostasis that once adorned the church. There you can also find scraps of luxurious church books and Bibles bound in leather and velvet. Bolshevism destroyed everything that was beautiful in this ugly country. What little remains is being destroyed by this war. On October 2nd, our attack took the enemy by surprise again. We did not think this was possible, given our open advance. The Russians knew neither the time nor the direction of the attack. As a result, after breaking through enemy lines, an entire corps, including my own left flank division, was able to advance for 2 days without coming into contact with the enemy. Nevertheless, the battle is far from over. We must take into account that the surrounded enemy will try to break out of the encirclement with desperate courage. We have already seen twice what this means. But overall, it must be said that the enemy has already been defeated, and that it will now lose the remaining core of its army, which is supposed to defend Moscow. By the end of the month, it will have neither its capital nor its famous industrial region in the Donets Basin, and its army will be horribly weakened. It will not be easy for the Russians to make up for these losses, but we cannot assume that the war is over. So far, every prisoner of war has declared, even if you drive us back to the Ural Mountains, there will be no peace between you and us. A Bolshevik cannot make peace with a National Socialist. An agreement is impossible. Yes, we are badly battered, but we are not defeated. We rely on the vast expanses of our country and our enormous human resources, and on the help of England and America. So we do not know how far we will have to fight our way in this inhospitable, God-forsaken country. Once again, we are surrounded only by forest, swamp, and bad roads. So far, in the first days of the offensive, the weather has been kind. But if it rains, we will have big problems advancing. For us, after 2 days of difficult fighting, there has been a bit of a pause. But tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow at the latest, it will end. Otherwise, I can't report anything significant. I have so far avoided the autumn cold that others have suffered from. My stomach and fingers have not given me any trouble, although I drink coffee every day and sometimes eat roast goose. The only things I can't tolerate are rye bread and pea soup. I am outside all day, and after sunset I work at my desk. Recently, I was shaken and tossed around in a car for 9 hours on terrible roads. It felt like I was being wheeled around. But tears won't help. You have to hold on. Others have to overcome even greater difficulties. Today, I saw a reconnaissance group returning from a mission. My God, how these people look, how exhausted they are as they trudge home, covered in a crust of dirt, beards grown wild, jackets worn out, trousers torn. It's even hard to take them for soldiers. No, war is not an easy business. October 10th. Clear evening sky, about -5 degrees. I sent another request for winter uniforms. Our soldiers are still wearing their summer uniforms, but the Army Group Command has made a principled decision that the delivery of ammunition and food is more important than the delivery of clothing. In my opinion, fundamental decisions are often wrong. Several train cars can always be sent, and they will be very useful. In this situation, none of the lower-ranking commanders dare to violate the fundamental decision. Even field mail is no longer being delivered, although some trains are carrying empty cars. October 16th. Letter to my wife. Today is our 21st wedding anniversary. I am in Sukinichi, a miserable trading town northwest of Kaluga. Wet snow fell all day, turning the roads into a bottomless black swamp. Today I was driving along the road to Kozelsk and saw a long line of drowned, stalled, and broken-down trucks, hopelessly stuck. About the same number of dead horses are lying in the mud next to the cars. We also got stuck today because of the impassable roads. 21 years ago, the day turned out better for us. At the very moment I am writing this, we reached Rauschen, where Marta welcomed us. Now our children have grown up, and we will soon be old. May God grant us the opportunity to celebrate our wedding anniversary with our children in peacetime once again, as we did 3 years ago, when Grandma and the Goldenfelds came to visit us. After everything that has happened during this time, it seems like that evening was a long time ago. We, that is, my corps, have built a new boiler in the meantime. For the 4th time during this campaign, we overtook the retreating Russians and cut off their escape route. The enemy army near Bryansk tried to break through where we were stationed. After 4 exhausting days of bloody battles, we pushed them back, section by section, until they were surrounded on all sides. The Corps captured 15,000 prisoners and 102 guns in those first days. We voluntarily left the destruction of the pocket, which was no longer of interest, to another corps, and ourselves moved northwest. The Russian army is partially falling apart at the seams. Here and there are clear signs of disintegration. Today I read that London fears a separate peace between Russia and us. I cannot imagine Hitler agreeing to make peace with the Bolsheviks. No, only with a different system, one friendly to National Socialism. I just heard the news that Odessa has fallen. Our frontline division is only 73 kilometers from Moscow. I think there is no one among us who would not want this war and our stay in Russia to end, but no one believes that this will happen. Anyone would gladly leave this country where there is nothing but deprivation, ugliness, and unheard-of difficulties. No one can imagine what an individual soldier goes through here, with all the local weather, terrain, living conditions, and trials that war imposes on him. Only those who have experienced such things themselves can understand what it is like to stand guard for hours in wet snow without warm clothes, for example, without gloves, with wet feet in a forest where there is nowhere to hide, but where the Russians are hiding, in the frost, when there are no hot drinks and nothing to fill your stomach with. Goodbye for today. I hope we will celebrate the next anniversary at home and in peace. October 18th. The lack of suitable maps is a particular difficulty for us. The so-called old Russian maps are so outdated that almost everything in them is wrong. Where there is supposed to be a forest, there are only fields. The roads are always marked incorrectly, and half of the villages are missing. Sometimes we manage to capture trophy maps, and these are much, much better than our German 1 to 100,000 scale maps. They are clear, understandable, and up to date. But today we don't have them, so we are half blind. The landscape has changed significantly. The plains have been replaced by hills, and the scenery is quite varied. The smooth clay makes any ascent or descent even more difficult. October 19th. The city of Kozelsk. It rains all day. We no longer receive supplies because everything is bogged down. Even the Corps Command has cut back on bread rations. We found flour in the city and are starting to bake our own bread at the collective farm bakery. Now we are subordinate to Guderian's tank group. It is stationed in Orel. We are not very happy about leaving the Second Army, as we are like a fifth wheel to the tankers. Given today's conditions, and taking into account the distances, we simply cannot catch up with them. The Second Army is also sorry to part with us. When I reported my reassignment by telephone, Colonel General von Weichs thanked me warmly and noted the great achievements of the Corps. We also do not want to leave the Second Army because it has always supported us in the best possible way. October 23rd. Report to my family. I am writing from the Kozelsk barracks. I can safely say this, given today's mail delivery times. It will be weeks before this letter reaches you. After the resistance of the Red Army west and south of Moscow was broken, nature came to Russia's defense. A few days ago, the constant frosts of -3 to -8 degrees with light snow that began at the end of September turned into rain, which greatly limited our maneuverability. For example, it took a truck 36 hours to cover 35 kilometers. Everyone was thrilled that it made it at all. Most of the convoys got stuck in impassable mud, swamps, and ruts in the road, which were half a meter deep and filled with water. The trucks, which were already barely moving, are now completely broken down. Spare parts are impossible to obtain. Gasoline, bread, oats, nothing is getting through. Horse-drawn carts are also stuck. Artillery cannot be delivered, and all personnel, infantry or otherwise, are pushing vehicles more than they are fighting. The roads are littered with dead horses and broken trucks. Again and again we hear the lament, "This cannot go on." And yet we must continue. We must move forward, even if slowly. The horse-drawn carts that saved us in the First World War have once again become the means of transport on which everything depends. But covering 100 or 120 kilometers to the supply station and back on these horses is a virtually insurmountable problem, which means we are facing insurmountable difficulties. So we are quite happy that since yesterday it has become colder and windier again. We hope that at least the roads will dry out. Churchill can take credit for the fact that we lost 4 weeks by getting involved in the Serbian campaign this spring. If we had had that month, we would already be in Moscow. In contrast to the landscape we saw before, the area near Kaluga, where we have just arrived, is quite varied and covered with hills up to 60 meters high. The riverbeds and streams are immovable, deep, and cause steep slopes. The soil is heavy clay, partly black earth, which turns into soap when it rains. The population looks like Eskimos. They wear felt boots or bast shoes, wrap their calves in felt, hide their bodies under old-fashioned thick brown sheepskin coats, which protect them from bomb fragments, and wrap their heads in thick shawls so that only their eyes and noses are visible. Pigs and chickens share their miserable dwellings with them. They sleep on the stove. The huts are full of bedbugs and lice. What a dreary geography, I can exclaim in unison with my Captain G from Württemberg. These people cannot be measured by our standards. I think that one can only truly relate to them if one sails here on a ship as if to a foreign continent, and as soon as one weighs anchor in our port, one must sever all ties with what is familiar to us. But we are slowly crawling on foot. Again and again I have to ask our new interpreter, Beidelsbacher, the son of an Odessa factory owner and now a private lecturer in Königsberg. Was there really no one in this country who opposed this inertia, this indifference? And why not? And every time I hear the same answer, Russians are completely passive. They do what they are told. When they are directed and controlled, they work willingly and excellently. But on their own initiative, on their own, they do nothing. They get used to the most deplorable living conditions and feel no need to change them. He would rather starve and beg than show initiative, take care of himself, and get down to business. As long as he doesn't have to work, he is content with one pair of shoes for the whole family, which is passed from one person to another as needed. In winter, he only gets off the stove to dig a path from the house to the well through the 5-foot snowdrifts. That's where his thirst for achievement ends. But this land has so much to offer. So much unused land lies idle. How sparsely populated these endless expanses are. How unkempt and neglected the forests are. No one is involved in forest planting here. When necessary, they cut down trees for firewood, and whether new trees will grow in place of the felled ones is left to the will of nature. Then, realizing the essence of the Russian people, you ask yourself, what will happen to this country in the future? Do you believe that the Russians will overthrow the existing system as a result of military defeats? The answer is no. They are not capable of doing so themselves. There is no one who would inspire them to do so. We have no choice but to create a government for them in the occupied territories. They themselves do not like Bolshevism. Too many have lost their relatives because of the Bolsheviks. Everyone lives in fear and under constant surveillance. In addition, the peasants want their land back. The elderly long for the church. I myself saw in Chernihiv how an old woman knelt down and thanked us for allowing her to attend church services again. The rest of them feel that their economic situation is too bad. In other words, Bolshevism has no friends in this country. And yet Russia can no longer destroy it on its own. But if we have to establish a government in the occupied territories, what will happen in the unoccupied ones? There is no answer to this question. Everything ends with the familiar shrug and the word nichevo. No one knows how everything will turn out. The Führer's headquarters probably has plans in this regard. I myself do not have a clear picture of the future. The Russian army on the central and southern sections of the front can be considered practically defeated. After Budeni was dealt with in the battles near Kiev and on the Azov Sea, something similar has now happened in the center, in the October battles near Bryansk and Vyazma. The Russians are completely unpredictable in their behavior during these battles. One moment they are fighting bravely as never before, and the next they are scattering into the woods and allowing themselves to be captured. I came across unarmed Russian detachments of 10 to 20 men who only wanted to know where to go to surrender, and who thanked me joyfully when I pointed them to the nearest town, Zhistra. Others, wanting to surrender, ran out of the forest with their hands up when they saw a German. Once they even helped us when we turned a captured battery around to fire on their own comrades. Hundreds of them work as drivers or chauffeurs in our divisions. In almost all units, Russian soldiers who understand a little German are used as interpreters. Recently, 2 cavalry lieutenants at the head of their platoon, in perfect order and fully armed, defected to us and brought 2 vehicles with them. They said that there is complete chaos on the Russian side. The entire chain of command and supply system are not working. They have not eaten anything for 4 days, and that one order is followed by another order that cancels it, so they no longer see any point in fighting. Today, a captain came over to us on horseback and said that the lack of discipline and chaos had reached such proportions that he had decided to leave this gang. This means that a crisis is indeed beginning on the other side, with heavy losses in manpower and equipment beginning to take their toll, forcing the Russians to send untrained recruits to the front who have neither the will to fight nor the training. Our planes drop propaganda leaflets with so-called passes for surrender, which are highly valued by Russian soldiers who seek them out and keep them. They fight over them, as each of them hopes to use them to reach us and avoid the torture with which the commissars have threatened them. When they are taken prisoner, they wave the leaflets or instantly take them out of their pockets as proof that they are only conscripted soldiers and that they do not want to fight against Germany. But it should be noted that this is not the case everywhere. For every 10,000 bad ones, there are thousands of good Red Army soldiers, and even now they are putting up stubborn, fierce resistance and counterattacking. One of our divisions encountered this yesterday. Events unfolded unfavorably for us, and we suffered heavy losses. Before winter sets in, the most important task is to destroy the remaining forces that are putting up resistance, in order to prevent the Russian army from reorganizing during the winter months. So far, this task has been hampered by strong and undefeated units on the northern section of the Russian front. In addition, there is a strong, well-armed Far Eastern army near Vladivostok. I do not know to what extent it is tied down there by the Japanese and whether it will remain there. Thus, we are increasingly focusing our attention on the coming winter, which we await with a sense of unease. Those units that will be withdrawn and transferred elsewhere are fortunate. That is definitely not the case for us. That's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. See you all soon.